Have you ever done something that you ended up not really enjoying, and sometime later, let's just say a year and a half later, for some reason you decide to do it again, whether it's watching a movie you hated, or a TV series, or playing a video game, or a DLC of a video game, like, for example, Joe's Adventures, which is part of Mafia 2 Definitive Edition, but originally it came out in November 2010. And yeah, this is one of those prime examples of regret revisited. Now, I played over Joe's Adventures for actually the very first time back in September, 2018, I believe it was, over a year and a half ago. I played on easy, and basically when it comes to Joe's Adventures, the difficulty setting is not what it seems, whereas in Mafia 2, easy's pretty easy. Medium's a little bit more challenging. Hard is hard. But Joe's Adventures, no. Easy is medium. Medium is hard. And hard is nightmare when it comes to this DLC. So, the premise of Joe's Adventures is it's set after Vito gets arrested in the main story of Mafia 2, and before he is officially released from prison. Small spoilers there for anyone. But it follows Joe Barbaro, which is Vito's best friend. He serves as the protagonist of Joe's Adventures, and it officially came out once again November 2010. Back on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 for the original version of Mafia 2, which is now known as Mafia 2 Classic, thanks to Mafia 2 Definitive Edition. Now, the version I'm playing right now, and the version I tried to stream through, is on Mafia 2 Definitive Edition, which include the main game, various bonus packs, along with the story DLC for Joe's Adventures, and even 2 other DLCs revolved around another character called Jimmy, the Betrayal Jimmy, as well as Jimmy's Vendetta. Now, those 2 DLCs are terrible, and I'm not going to make a video about them because it's not really canon anyways. It's added value with Mafia 2 Definitive Edition, so I'm not too worried about it. Now, the difference is Joe's Adventures is partially canon. In fact, it is complete canon, and that is what makes people feel like they should play Joe's Adventures because of the fact that it is connected to some degree to the main story of Mafia 2. So after you play through Mafia 2 and you have it on Definitive Edition, it gives you extra content to play after you're done. So that's good. It's definitely a pro in my opinion, and I will be doing a review of Mafia 2 Definitive Edition sometime later on this week, so be on the lookout for that. And basically, Joe's Adventures is twofold. It consists of what is called the side quests here for different characters that you encounter in Joe's Adventure. Some of them are actually in Mafia 2 main story, but there's also like story missions. So you have the story missions, which are fine, and then you have these arcade-style, time-based secondary missions, as I call them, and you have to do a certain number of them to get the mission score up high enough to unlock the next story mission, until you eventually get to the final story mission, and then you're able to complete Joe's Adventures. Now, like I mentioned, the story missions are fine, but they feel like they've been repurposed from the editing room floor of Mafia 2, because there was some cut content from Mafia 2 back in the day. But in order to unlock the story missions, as I mentioned, you have to endure, and I do mean this, endure the secondary missions. And they're a pain in the ass, as some of you probably are fully aware of. These arcade-style side missions, all of which have a timer. Yes, they all have to be completed within a certain amount of time. And I believe the difficulty is tied to the timer. So, quote-unquote, easy in Joe's Adventure is, I guess, an okay amount of time. When you play it on medium, you have less time. And when you play it on hard, you have, well, even less time to complete the secondary missions. And a lot of them are basically the same. They're very repetitive. do this, do that from point A to point B, get to the safe zone. You get scored an S rating all the way down to, I think, a D rating upon completion. So I guess there's incentive for you to replay the missions in order to get better, in order to try to get A's and S's for all those secondary missions. But some of the missions just really aren't worth doing because of the pain and the suffering, the agony that you have to endure in order to complete these side quests. They're not all hard, but some of them are a real pain. And it's compounded by the fact that they have timers. And truth be told, most of these secondary missions would be considerably more enjoyable if they didn't have a timer. And the truth is the timer isn't really necessary anyways because they're a bit challenging even without the timer. Some of them, yeah, obviously there is purpose to timed-based missions where you have to do something within a certain amount of time. But the reality is most of the secondary missions, if you think about it long enough, are like, wait a minute, that doesn't really require you to do this within a certain amount of time. It's just something they put into the game to give you a contrived sense of urgency in order to rush through or attempt to rush through the secondary missions without even trying to enjoy them. And that's part of the problem. The point of a video game is entertainment, enjoyment. And whenever you take away the enjoyment factor, the fun factor, as Carrick likes to call it over at ACG, when you take away a fun factor in a mission by always forcing a timer, like with the secondary missions of Joe's Adventures, then people aren't enjoying them as much. Unless you happen to enjoy the pressure of completing something within a certain time frame. Some players may actually like Joe's Adventures. And yes, Joe's Adventures is a better DLC than the Jimmy DLCs. But since the Jimmy DLCs, once again, are not technically canon to Mafia 2, it's just a take it or leave it. You don't really have to play the Jimmy DLCs, part of Mafia 2 Definitive Edition, but it's extra value to the game. Joe's Adventures, on the other hand, you kind of want to play through because you want to see how things went down from Joe's point of view. And if you try to line up without spoiling some of the things that happen, it doesn't really fit with the main story of Mafia 2. Some things that are mentioned in Mafia 2 main story don't really connect so well with how it plays out when Joe's Adventures. It's not like 100% canon breaking, but there is some, I guess, trying to put a circle inside a square peg when it comes to some of the things that are mentioned in the main story. And then you see it once again from Joe's perspective. Then you're like, well, wait a minute, but this is how it actually played out. So how did this actually happen? And then when it comes to the safe houses, without adding further spoilers from Mafia 2 main story, there's at least one safe house that's kind of sort of canon breaking as well. It really doesn't make sense for that to be a safe house, but without, like I said, unintentionally spoiling Mafia 2, back to Mafia 2 Joe's Adventures. So the side missions, in my opinion, should have been completely optional. And they were only put in to pad the runtime of Joe's Adventures. I'm convinced of this, that if they would have simply just made it to where you could just do the main story missions by themselves, back to back to back, yeah, that might have been like an hour of a DLC, but that would have been fine, especially if you would have had the side quests as optional, where, okay, I did the main story, I did all that, I knocked it out, I spent some time with Joe Barbaro, found out what he was up to in between certain events in Mafia 2 when Vito goes to prison and before Vito gets out of prison. But then the secondary missions, just something extra you can do for fun, and some of them, like I mentioned, okay to have a timer. I don't have a problem with that. Others don't really need the timer, and it just takes away the overall joy and experience of playing a video game when every single mission in the side quests, or the side missions, or whatever you want to call them, involve a timer. It just annoys me. But some of you may be saying, well, this was 2010 GB, and, story DLCs weren't so good. You gotta, take it easy on those that made Joe's Adventures because of that fact. Well, I will counter that argument with a couple of story DLCs that happened to come out in 2010. First off, Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare came out in October 2010. And Grand Theft Auto 4's story DLCs, Lost and Damned, came to Xbox 360 February 29, 2009, February 2009. Wow, it's been over a decade. And then a year later, that same DLC came out on the PlayStation 3 and Windows in April 2010. Also, Battle of Gaytoni came out to PlayStation 3 and Windows also in April 2010. And then a year prior, October 2009. So 3 examples of really good story DLCs that came out in the same time period as Joe's Adventures came out. So once again, that argument is kind of invalid. The problem is Joe's Adventures could have been enjoyable if they would have done a better job adding some additional dialogue with Joe, because a lot of it does feel like it's just repurposed from the main story. And there's times whenever certain missions happen and he'll repeatedly say, "Hey, it's me, Joe." And it doesn't really add to the emotion of the scene, even though there's music in certain side quests or side missions, as you wish to call them, which try to make you feel some sense of emotion when you have Joe walk up and he's like, "Hey, it's me, Joe." And then you're like, okay, well, that's not what Joe would, that's not how he would react. It's obviously just a repurpose of dialogue in the main story. And like I mentioned, the DLC itself didn't need to be as long as it is. The side quests are obviously padded to increase the play time, the run time, and simply the side quests could have just been optional. I do like the fact that Joe's Adventures is one of the free mode options for Mafia 2, because that's something a lot of people really didn't like about Mafia 2 main story, is you don't really have the ability to free roam. I mean, you can free roam before moving on to the next chapter, but it's very linear. So that's one thing that people do enjoy about Joe's Adventures, and to some degree the Jimmy DLCs, is the free roam aspects of those DLCs. So that's definitely a pro in my opinion. But overall, it's sad looking back at Joe's Adventures, the potential of this DLC, and the fact that Joe is such an interesting character, along with some of the others he encounters, and the missed opportunities with the Joe's Adventures story DLC for Mafia 2. But it's great that it is added value along with the Jimmy updates and all the bonus packs that came with Mafia 2 Definitive Edition. But I have no interest in playing through Joe's Adventures again. Over a year ago, I played through it for the very first time on easy. And like I said, easy is basically medium. There was a lot of salt during those streams. And my attempt at playing Joe's Adventures on medium, which is basically hard, that didn't end so well. But yeah, I'm moving on. I'm learning from my mistakes. We all make mistakes. We all do things that we end up regretting. And sometimes we repeat those mistakes. And in my case, recently, it was trying to play through Joe's Adventures once again. But anyways, those are my thoughts regarding Joe's Adventures, now part of the Mafia 2 Definitive Edition, which is part of the Mafia Trilogy if you just want to buy it all. $60 for the Mafia Trilogy. I think that's the best deal. You get Mafia Definitive Edition in August, as well as Mafia 2 and Mafia 3 Definitive Editions, along with all those bonus packs and DLCs. But if you want to buy Mafia 2 Definitive Edition, I will have a review on it coming up later this week, sharing my thoughts, views, and opinions regarding Mafia 2 Definitive Edition. But I would love to know what you think about Mafia 2 Joe's Adventures, whether you played it on Mafia 2 Classic, or you've also played it again in Mafia 2 Definitive Edition. Not really too much difference. Maybe graphically it does look a little bit better when Mafia 2 Definitive Edition on current gen, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, as well as PC compared to last gen. But other than the ability to use, for example, the Drifter from Mafia 3, thanks to having the Mafia Trilogy version of the game, to be honest, it's not really much difference, except for the fact that there was a lot of salt whenever I played through Joe's Adventures both times. And I have no interest in continuing to play through Joe's Adventures a second time on medium. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. Your thoughts, your views, and opinions regarding Joe's Adventures, as always, welcome below in the comments section.